Chapter 16. Together Again. Gali relinquished the water jets from her hooks after dousing the last of the fires in the area. Streaks of orange light were still blazing in the distance, but slowly shrunk away as their appetites were satiated, leaving nothing left but ash and smoke. With the help of Pohatu, Onua, Lewa, and the Matoran, they neared the 24th hour of battling the flames. Neither she nor the other Toa present had ever exerted such levels of elemental power. She felt as if this had been the first time she released her control over the water since arriving to aid the region. And despite her outstanding progress, less than 10% of Liwahi remained unburned. She dropped her heavy arms to her sides, nearly releasing her grip on her hooks before returning them to her hips. She trudged through the mushy ground before kneeling down beside the other exhausted Toa. They were sat among a crowd of drained Matoran of both earth and air. Onua and Pohatu were slumped forward, trying to remain upright after such a strenuous task, while Lewa stood leaning against his axe, soaking in the sight of the charred black graveyard that was once his home wahi.
I did this,
Lewa said sorrowfully.
The wahi is blaze-wiped because I wasn't strong enough to resist the Bohrok.
No,
Gali said.
None of this is your fault. Nor is it the fault of the Le Matoran.
What happened to you could have happened to any one of us just as easily,
Pohatu added. Onua stood and walked over beside Lewa.
Don't forget, you were strong enough to resist. You were the one to cast away the Kana, no one else.
Lewa glanced toward the axe wound over Onua's shoulder, which had reopened in the midst of their efforts to control the fires. He forced himself to keep looking at it, punishing himself for the weakness that caused it.
Yes, but that's late to be of any worth.
Onua shifted his body, pulling his shoulder away from Lewa's gaze when he noticed him staring toward it.
Don't start down that path, Lewa. I couldn't have saved the Matoran without your help.
And we still need to stop the invasion altogether.
Gali added.
We can't do that without you.
And even if we could,
Pohatu said.
We wouldn't want to.
Lewa smiled weakly.
Many thanks, Pohatu.
He speaks for us too,
Onua said, with Gali nodding in agreement. The Toa were interrupted by the commotion of the nearby Matoran. They turned to find the unexpected sight of Tahu and Kopaka walking side by side through the destroyed jungle. When they caught sight of the other four, their pace quickened until they reached them.
What happened here?
Tahu asked as he glanced around the charred wreckage where Liwahi once stood. Lewa was about to answer, but was beat by Onua.
The Bohrok happened. We need to find a way to stop them before this happens to the rest of the island.
We have a lead,
Tahu said.
Kopaka tracked one of them back to their nest.
Nest?
Gali asked.
Where?
Kauai,
Kopaka replied.
beneath the island. Just as the Turaga said.
It's not going to be easy,
Tahu added.
They've only sent a fraction of their numbers to the surface.
The other Toa exchanged glances before Lewa spoke up.
Tahu's right. The swarm crowds we've battled for are just a warm-up. We won't be able to face them all once they top reach the island.
How do you know that?
Kopaka asked. None of the others spoke up as they collectively looked at Lewa, who shamefully hung his head before answering Kopaka's question.
I was compromised.
What?
Tahu asked, taking a step forward.
The Bohrok snap captured my mind,
Lewa explained.
They forced me to do things against my choice will. The death state you now see my wahi being the main prime example.
Tahu was unsure how to respond. Even Kopaka appeared visibly surprised by the news, as they both once again glanced around the destroyed scenery. The hundreds of Onu and Li Matoran scattered about raised further questions.
What happened?
It wasn't his fault,
Onua said.
They used the Kana against him, but he beat it.
Only when Onua spoke up did Tahu notice the gaping wound on the Toa of Earth's shoulder. He quickly realized it matched the size of Lewa's axe blade. while they both bore a coating of burns and scuffs across their bodies.
Is that so?
He just needed a push. In the end, he overcame their hold and removed the Kana himself. I'm not sure that the rest of us could have done the same.
Assuming the rest of us would have allowed it to happen in the first place. Tahu!
Pohatu stepped in.
It wasn't just him. All of Likoro were captured, even the Turaga.
But they aren't Toa.
Tahu's right.
Lewa interjected.
I failed you all, the Matoran, and an ever-long list of others. But I want wish nothing more than to atone. If you spot found the Bohrok nest hive, then whatever are we waiting for?
Tahu paused briefly to assess Lewa's words, ultimately deeming them adequate before giving a subtle nod of approval.
Rest up, Toa. We'll need our full strength for the mission. We make for the nest in 4 hours.
The Toa heeded Tahu's orders and took their recess from the Matoran crowd. Gali traveled west to the shore to replenish her energy beneath the waves. Pohatu conversed with the nearby villagers, and Onua and Lewa found quiet places to rest away from the crowds and tend to their own wounds privately. Tahu took the opportunity to explore the area, assessing the extent of the destruction and absorbing the small bits of lingering flames into his sword. Kopaka had disappeared entirely, to whereabouts unbeknownst to anyone, yet returned by the exact moment they were prepared to set out.
We're only 5 or 6 miles out.
Kopaka announced to the other Toa.
It won't take long to get there.
Is everyone ready?
Tahu asked. The other 4 Toa only looked slightly less disheveled than they had 4 hours prior, with Pohatu being the only one that actually seemed remotely prepared for the mission ahead, and even he appeared worn, though not as much as Gali. The worst of them was Onua, who remained upright miraculously despite his collection of burns, scrapes, and lacerations. Yet they all carried a look of determination in their eyes, the most intense of which being found in Lewa's.
We're ready,
Onua announced.
Lead the way.
Following Tahu's lead, the Toa started off northbound toward Kauai. Mount Ihu could be seen clearly in the distance, especially since few trees remained standing to obstruct their view. The disorderly crowd of exhausted and broken-spirited Matoran watched as their heroes departed, igniting a spark of hope that the nightmare plaguing the island would soon be vanquished.
I haven't had the chance to say it yet,
Pohatu began.
but it's good to all be back together again.
I couldn't agree more.
Said Gali.
Perhaps next time we shouldn't wait until we're all needed,
Onua added.
We still have work to do together once the Bohrok are defeated.
We do?
Of course.
Replied Gali, glancing toward Onua.
We have a house to rebuild.
Onua smiled back at her.
Thanks, but we need to make sure all the Matoran have their homes back first. It wouldn't feel right otherwise.
There's going to be a lot of cleaning up to do when this is over. I just hope we can work at it without any more interruptions for a while.
The Matoran deserve a break. They've been through way too much over the last century. We should have destroyed Makuta when we had the chance.
Tahu said.
None of this would be happening.
But did we really have the chance? We tried.
We could have tried harder. We should have tried harder.
We can't change it now. There will be another chance, I'm sure. Besides, are we certain he is even behind this?
Who else?
Kopaka asked.
Trust me. It's him. It wouldn't surprise me.
Pohatu said.
He couldn't control the island, so he creates a way to destroy it so no one can. He's a bit of a sore loser if you ask me.
Makuta didn't form-shape the Bohrok beasts.
Lewa interjected, speaking for the first time since their departure. The other Toa glanced back to Lewa, surprised by his confident statement.
Then where did they come from?
Gali asked.
They've been around far long before Makuta's dark times. Before the village Koro were even settled fixed.
How do you know this?
Tahu asked suspiciously.
The Kana mask. When it was drive stealing my mind, it spoke taught things.
Things.
Kopaka repeated.
What things?
I'm not too sure. The Twin Queen's Way showed me a lot, but when I pulled the Kana mask, most of that knowledge died with it.
But you still remember some things, right?
Pohatu asked.
Scarce little. Mostly echoes and images.
It could still be useful. It's more than we had before.
If that's the case, then tell us everything you remember. We may need it.
I don't think it's going to work play like that. I don't remember what I remember. Nothing is plain clear.
Why do they want to destroy the island? What do they gain from it?
I don't know. They never told me. But it was all they cared about. All they knew. They preached of the cleanse like it was their true soul duty mission. They said short little of what was to come after.
Back in the jungle, you said the Matoran weren't supposed to be here. What did that mean?
They seemed surprised by the Matoran, as if they were some kind of unexpected setback to their duty plans. Whatever their motive cause may be, I don't think Judge the Matoran have anything to do with it.
This just keeps getting weirder,
Pohatu commented.
It doesn't matter,
said Tahu.
Regardless of what motivates them, we're putting a stop to it.
There is still so much we don't understand about the island. It's unsettling.
Because we aren't allowed to understand,
Tahu replied disdainfully.
According to the Turaga.
Gali sighed.
Perhaps they don't have all the answers. You put too much focus on what they haven't told us rather than what they have.
We can all see that they know more than they're letting on. They were here before anyone else on the island. Does it not disturb anyone else how much they're holding back from us? Or do you all just accept it like the Matoran? I can't be the only one.
You're not,
Kopaka replied.
Surely they have a valid reason for keeping secrets.
Pohatu proposed.
Do they? We have no way of knowing that.
Perhaps they're trying to protect us from something.
Or trying to protect themselves.
We've seen enough to know they're on our side. We may not understand their motives, but we can say for certain they aren't malicious, whatever they may be.
They may not be malicious. Doesn't mean they're good.
I'm sure they'll reveal their secrets when the time is right. Then, maybe we'll understand the reason for the secrecy in the first place.
And when will the time be right, Gali? When the rest of the island looks like Lewa? Maybe they don't know as much as we think they do,
said Pohatu.
Turaga Winnowa was the only one that seemed to know about the Bohrok at all.
That only raises more questions.
You both make valid points. I understand the concern, but we can't afford to dwell on what they may or may not be hiding from us. We have to trust them.
Tahu scoffed.
Trust goes both ways, and they don't seem to trust us to know the truth.
Gali didn't have a response this time. She glanced back toward Onua, who just shrugged his good shoulder in response. The next few minutes of their journey were silent as they neared the end of the devastated mess that no longer even resembled a jungle. The hot crunch of the black grass was quickly replaced with the cooler, softer green. Lewa took a final look back at the devastation he partook in as they neared the Kauai border.
You said something about twin queens.
Pohatu asked Lewa.
What's that about?
Kadok and Gadok. Yes, they're the boss minds of the swarms. They're the ones that Foz planted those trouble thoughts into my mind.
What else can you tell us about them?
I never caught look sight of them. I only thought I heard their whispers. They sounded ever pleasant, inviting, ever deceptive, until Nua showed up. Then their gentle, soft voices turned to scrape, grating screams. Too sorry, friends, I heart wish I knew more.
It's all right. We're just glad you're back with us.
When you wore the Kana, Could you hear the Bohrok too?
Pohatu asked further.
Yes, our main thoughts were linked. We never had the tongue speak at all.
That must have been overwhelming. Hearing all those different thoughts at once. What do Bohrok even think about anyway?
The cleanse. They didn't sense no anything else. Clean it all, it must be cleaned. That was all there was. Kadok and Gadok did all the reason thinking for them.
Good.
Tahu replied.
That means they'll all feel the same terror when we kick down their door.
The grass beneath their feet began to crunch again due to the layer of frost that thickened as they progressed. The terrain transitioned to uneven and jagged hills and slopes, while large patches of slushy snow appeared along their path, eventually joining into a powdery blanket that covered their surroundings. Within the first mile into the Wahi, the falling snow had grown to such severity that they struggled to see the path ahead.
It's not much further,
Kopaka announced. They soon reached the base of Mount Ihu, where they followed Kopaka's lead, nearly losing sight of his white body in the blizzard as he wrapped around its circumference. When they neared the area, he activated his Kanohiakaku to aid his search through the heavy snowfall. He stopped just outside the opening, signaling the others to do the same. He drew his sword and absorbed the twisting and blinding snow into the blade, clearing their view into the short entryway at the base of the mountain. With his mask still activated, he studied the inside of the tunnel.
This is it?
Pohatu asked.
It's one of them,
Lewa replied, causing the other Toa to glance his way before he elaborated.
There are multiple tunnel vents throughout the island, but they're all hard well hidden.
Why are you only just now telling us this?
Tahu asked.
Because I'm only just now place grasping it. I past told you, I don't remember what I remember. But it doesn't not matter. They all branch lead to the same place. This one will do a good thing.
Get ready.
Kopaka said as he deactivated his mask.
They're coming up now.
How many?
Onua asked.
More than you're expecting.
The Toa drew their weapons and began to spread out, ready for what was to come. Confirming the Toa of Ice's report, echoes of scampering claws and clanking metal sprayed from the small cave opening, followed by an outpour of Tanakh, Parok, and Korok. The size of the opening forced them to exit one at a time, making them easy targets for the Toa. At first, they had little trouble eliminating those that came through, but with each Bohrok that was slightly tougher than the rest, or carried a specialized Krana, more and more quickly slipped through, springing open to join the battle against the 6 interferences. Tahu intercepted a Tanakh that had targeted Gali, catching up to it and hacking off its foot before it could strike. The Bohrok dropped face first into the snow, allowing Tahu to drive his sword down its back. He pulled the sword free and removed its head with a quick and low swipe. Another Bohrok rushed to avenge its fallen ally, but Tahu sidestepped from its path and severed its swiping arm and embedded his blade into the side of its body. It dropped to the ground as Tahu tore the blade free and finished it off with a thorough bisection. He dodged the ramming head of a third, countering with 2 slashes to its chest. The next to attack was a Korok with a flight Krana, which circled overhead as it sprayed its freezing vapor toward him. He activated his Kanohi-Hau to protect himself from the blast. Once the attack ceased, he deactivated the mask and leaped up with the thrust of his blade, stabbing it up through its head, piercing the Krana inside and forcefully yanking it from the air. 2 more stepped up to challenge him, twitching their limbs in anticipation. He charged forward with a roar and decapitated the first, but the second in line threw up a shield, which caused his flaming sword to bounce off. He stumbled back before resetting his feet. Once its shield finally disappeared, it lunged forward, but was thwarted by Tahu's own shielding ability. He stabbed his blade straight through the side of its face before tearing it out and cutting through its neck. As its headless body slinked into the snow, Tahu was grabbed from behind and tossed off his feet. From the force of the throw, it was clear this Bohrok possessed a strength Krana. He rolled onto his back and hurled a ball of fire into its face as it rushed toward him, slowing its charge long enough for the Toa of Fire to clamber to his feet and drive his sword through its chest. A nearby Bohrok fired up its hand shields and engaged Tahu. Tahu stepped back to avoid its strikes and stabbed it through its chest. It shrieked as it tried to persist in its attack, but was dropped from the snow in pieces once Tahu pulled his sword free and hacked its limbs apart. The Tanakh standing behind it barely had time to react before he slashed off its feet and hewed its neck before it hit the ground. Tahu swung toward the next in line, another Tanakh, but it dodged the sweeping blade and pounced forward, latching its auxiliary limbs into his upper back. Tahu fought to stay upright as the added weight made him top-heavy. Gritting his teeth through the pain, he pounded the pommel of his sword into the side of its face until he heard its eyes shatter. He secured a grip onto its ankle and jerked it from his shoulders. It tumbled to the ground. Before it stood back up, its face was skewered by Kopaka's blade. It dropped into the snow as Kopaka found himself flanked by two more assailants, both Bohrok. He shot ice spears one by one, disorienting them as they rushed forward, causing them to swat wildly. He smoothly stepped from the path of both of their wild and aimless attacks and eliminated them each with well-placed slashes across their backs. He gained the attention of another creature, which only had the chance to let out a threatening hiss before he thrust his sword through its chest. He removed the blade with a fanciful flourish as another two Bohrok took its place. As they tried to attack simultaneously, Kopaka kicked the headplate of the first and slashed across the face of the second. He pivoted back toward the first with a horizontal slash just beneath its swiping claws, dropping it. He sliced off the legs of the second and ran his sword through its jaw. He spun around in time to deflect the hand shield of another Bohrok, which he followed up by smashing its face with the rim of his shield and stabbing through its body. Two more came at him, but he slowed their charge with a series of small and precise strikes, hopping back and forth between them until their mangled bodies ceased to fight back. Kopaka shot an ice spear into the back of a Tanakh, which turned to face him and retaliated by spraying jets of fire from its hand shields. Kopaka raised his shield against the flames, but they were quickly doused by a stream of water. The Bohrok looked up toward the source of the disruption, finding the tips of Gali's hooks to be the last things it ever saw. The Toa of water sprung off the dead Bohrok's faceplate and landed on top of another, knocking it to the ground and planting her hooks into its skull. She sprinted toward the next Bohrok in her sight, weaving around its swiping claws and hooking its neck. She jerked it to the ground and slashed through its center mass. Just as she stood up, a Bohrok attempted to take out her balance with a ramming thrust, but she swung her leg over its pecking head and flowed into a graceful spin before severing its extended neck. Three more Bohrok encircled her as they decided which one would strike first. The first two attacked at once. She vaulted over the first and kicked away the second. She dodged and swayed around each of their attacks until she found the opportunities to cut them down. The last of the three waited its turn, until it finally revealed it was wearing a strength Kana when it rammed its face into her midsection. The breath in her lungs was blasted away when she was launched several yards away, leaving a deep trail through the snow. She rolled onto her hands and knees, fighting to catch her breath through the pain and sharp Kauahi air. She looked up to see the Bohrok approaching her, ready to strike again. She pushed herself back onto her feet and shook off the blow. When the Bohrok rammed its head a second time, she twisted out of its path and hooked the back of its skull, prying open its headplate and stabbing into the Kana inside. She found the nearest Bohrok had its back turned, so she snuck up behind it and yanked its feet out from beneath it before finishing it off. Gali caught the attention of a nearby Bohrok. It raised its hand shields at her, spraying its icy vapor in her direction. She rolled from its path, narrowly avoiding its attack. She retaliated with a jet of water from her hooks, which was frozen solid before it could reach the Bohrok, causing it to be pelted by a hail of ice shards. This broke its concentration, forcing it to cease its attack. Just as she shook off the distraction, it was taken out by a boulder smashed over its head by Pohatu. With his Kanohi Kakama active, the Toa of stone blasted toward his next target, slamming it into the snow and denting its face with a mighty kick. Another Bohrok charged at him, thrusting its head toward his chest. He caught it by its face and ripped its headplate clean off, tossing out the Kana inside. He hoisted its limp body over his head and chucked it into the next in line. The next one he engaged dodged his first 3 strikes, but failed to evade having its legs taken out with a sweeping kick as the 4th. He stomped it out before it had the chance to stand back up. He activated his mask again, smashing into 2 more Bohrok that failed to see him coming. Pohatu deactivated his mask and grabbed the nearest Korok by its ankle. He yanked it off its feet and tossed it away. It tumbled through the snow, coming to a stop just before being split open by the blade of Lewa's axe. Lewa pulled the axe free, twirling it behind his back into an upward swing into the jaw of the Parok standing behind him. A group of 4 Parok closed in on him from all directions, powering up their hand shields and attempting to shatter his body. Lewa acrobatically leaped, twisted, flipped, and rolled around each of their swatting and ramming, chopping off limbs and heads in the process. A Tanakh sprayed its flames toward him, but Lewa leaped from its path. Focusing his energy into his axe, he conjured a small cyclone, which sucked up the flames, followed by the Bohrok itself, and tossed it across the battlefield, where it was caught midair by Onua. With the aid of his Kanohi Pikari, he crushed the Tanakh's head within his claws, and used its limp body to pummel the one that tried to attack his legs. The explosive movement caused a ripple of searing pain to explode from his wounded shoulder. The sting brought him to his knees. His limited use of his arm took a heavy toll on his fighting abilities, which allowed the Bohrok to close in on him. He swiped his claws at the nearest one, slashing its face apart. He balled his fist and caved in the headplate of the next, which freed up the time to stand back up. Another lunged toward him, but he kicked it into the snow before inverting its chest with a stomp of his foot. Onua stepped back and spared a moment to catch his breath as he clutched the gash on his shoulder. A nearby Tanakh took notice of his pause and rushed to take advantage of it. Before it could reach him, Tahu tore open its back with a single swing. He and Onua exchanged nods of acknowledgement before he turned around to engage the 3 Korok that approached him. He countered their ice weapons with a wall of flame before messily removing each of their heads. Tahu turned around to blast a bolt of fire into the face of an approaching Parok. It conjured a shield to protect itself from the blast, but deactivated it too early as it failed to notice the armored brown foot that hammered against the side of its face. Pohatu conjured a boulder from the ground and launched it into the back of a distant Bohrok. When it was knocked to the ground, Kopaka drove his blade into the side of its head. He batted away the next one with his shield and quickly sliced off both its hand shields. As it staggered back and inspected the damage, Lewa dropped down beside it and cleaved off its head. The Bohrok had stopped emerging from the opening, leaving the Toa with the rapidly dwindling few that remained. Lewa locked his gaze on a Korok that prepared to strike. It stood ready, twitching and growling in anticipation as it studied the Toa of air.
You betrayed us.
Lewa took a step back, pressing his hand against the forehead of his mask in surprise. With his focus compromised, the Bohrok pounced, but was sent flying in 2 directions when Tahu's sword blocked its path. He turned back to Lewa, who had only just regained his bearings.
Stay focused, Toa,
Tahu barked.
Sorry, bad,
Lewa said, still taken aback by the sudden voice in his head. The Toa continued to fight until every last Bohrok had been destroyed. When the battle was over, they could hardly take a step without tripping over the wrecked parts that were scattered through the snow, a testament to their efficiency when fully united as a team. Tahu watched Lewa, noticing that whatever had suddenly distracted him during the fight was still present in his mind.
Is that the last of them?
Gali asked.
Yes.
Kopaka replied, using his Kanohi Akaku to inspect the opening.
For now.
Is everyone ready?
Onua asked.
Wait, not yet.
Pohatu called as he scoured the battlefield, carefully searching through each destroyed vessel.
What are you doing?
Kopaka asked. Pohatu didn't respond. Instead, he kept searching, until he finally came across 2 cleanly severed Tanakh heads. He knelt down and turned them over, tearing out the inner components and hollowing out the insides. The 5 others watched in confusion as he worked at this unexplained task. He then placed the heads on the ground and slid his hands inside them before standing back up. He knocked together his new makeshift gloves before proudly strolling over next to the other Toa.
Okay, now I'm ready.